Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. It is CoachFury here today, and we are back in the world of the CBGM for the second episode of our Coaches Corner. This is a series that we are running here on the channel where we talk to different coaches in the CBGM, the Draft Day Sports College Basketball 21 multiplayer league. There's over 100 and something teams now that have been taken by human coaches, so plenty of people to talk to, plenty of insights, thoughts and views we can gather from teams, from the game, from general basketball philosophy. So today I'm joined obviously by a new guest, Coach Kev. Coach Kev, welcome very much to the channel.
Hey man, I appreciate you inviting me on. I really like this series, and so I wanted to come support it and hopefully encourage some other coaches to hop on with you. I think it's a really cool thing you're doing here.
Cool, good stuff. And I promise that this is not just a Big Ten focus. I know we've had two Big Ten teams now on the channel, but we do welcome any others, and we all talk a little bit about the Sun Belt today, I'm sure, because that is one of your teams. But before we talk about your actual CBGM teams, be interested to know a little bit about your background and history in the world of sim leagues. Has it always been basketball? Have you played different things? How did you arrive at the CBGM?
Yeah, I've always played games in general. When it comes to sim league stuff, I'm still relatively new to multiplayer leagues. I've played sim games, but in the past, it's mostly been single player where I jump in with plans to run a 20-year dynasty, and I get about a year in, and then I get distracted and I put it down, and then I just waste my money on the next version and kind of repeat the process. And so I've been doing that for a couple of years now, but it's the multiplayer aspect that's really kind of hooked me in. I've had draft day college sports and pro sports games. I've bought them going back to probably DDS 18 versions. Mostly college basketball and a little bit of pro basketball, but I've also recently joined an online football league and stuff. And so I'd say I'm still relatively new, but it's definitely the multiplayer aspect that I think makes it fun for me. And so I'm really excited about the CBGM and some other leagues.
Yeah, awesome. I hope that online football league you joined was the CSFL, by the way. I don't actually know if that is the case, but if not, I suggest you go and check that one out.
Okay. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. It was not that one, but
you need to get yourself in the CSFL. I'm telling you, not because I'm an admin over there, but just a little bit biased. But it's great. It's great to see that you've obviously played a range of these general manager games, which is great, because obviously that's one of the things that GM Games is promoting, is obviously all the different types of games. And you obviously mentioned you've played a lot of them back from Draft Day Sports sort of 18 onwards, so several different versions. And I guess question really is what kind of made you make the jump from the solo sort of single player leagues that you've been playing to the human element and multiplayer leagues? It sounds like you've just started in the past couple of seasons, really.
Yeah, I think the CBGM is actually a good example of what I kind of would hope, or at least what I was hoping to get out of multiplayer leagues. I think Chris has done a really good job setting up the media and the website and things like that. I just think the multiplayer game is, for me, it's more competitive. I know the single player's got its own challenges and stuff, but I think at some point you're going to figure out how to kind of beat the computer, and at that point it gets sort of boring for me. So having a multiplayer league with human coaches and human strategies and changes and stuff it's more exciting. But the real part is kind of like being able to jump on here, have this call with you, see other people's perspectives, and kind of have this more involved story that kind of develops, that you can kind of tell. And I think that's pretty neat. And that's what sort of made me make the jump in. Really, the multiplayer is the only sticking point. I think at some point I probably would have given up on single player versions if it wasn't for some of these leagues that have started up.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to kind of agree with everything you said there. I mean, it's interesting that a lot of people go through the cycle of playing the single player games, getting to a point where either they're too easy in against the computer and they want a proper challenge, and the proper challenge is another human on the other end who does something completely different to what the AI would do. or they want, the story-driven narrative that the CBGM brings as well, where the media and everything that Chris is doing on the league itself is going to hopefully over the coming seasons develop a real narrative of how players develop, how teams develop, etc. So it's great to see. Let's talk a little bit about your general basketball philosophy then. So as I asked on the first episode, I mean, where do you kind of sit? What's your school of thought in terms of how you like to see basketball played, and whether you're looking to translate that to the CBGM of your teams?
Very opinionated about basketball. I actually am a basketball coach, or at least a volunteer coach. I've been doing that for about 5 years now, 5 seasons. It's not my day job, but I've been an active varsity and I'm sure how familiar you are, but high school level coach here in the States. So can
I ask a quick question? Because obviously I'm not from the US, so my knowledge of anything below college and pro league, it's basically limited to the Netflix series of Last Chance U, basically. And that is pretty much my limit of JUCO, and that's it. So I'd be interested to understand a little bit. So you said you're obviously a high school coach. I mean, how does that kind of work? I mean, I guess it's not, as you said, it's probably not a full-time role. How do you get involved with that? And give us a little bit of a narrative. That would be really fascinating.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm not familiar with how things are in Europe. I think in general, the difference is here in the States, athletics is really tied to education and your education systems and stuff. And so if my understanding is correct, which it may be totally off, but like in Europe and things, young players before, college age, tend to align with like club teams, whether that's basketball or soccer or whatever.
That's correct. Just very quickly to confirm that. So they essentially, from the way it works in Europe, is that you still play at like a high school level, or you can play at a college level, but it's deemed as not being very, very good. You tend to be a proper player in terms of someone who might go to the US to play in college, or maybe possibly become a professional. Is you'd work through the club scheme and you'd play for like an identified club, and eventually, if you were good enough, then from the ages of 16 or 15, you could be playing professionally or being paid to play. And that sort of opens you up to maybe playing wider in Europe, or playing in college in America, or pro in America, etc.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest difference. And not being an expert, I won't get into too much detail about that. But here it would essentially be like, instead of having club teams that youth players play in, so we'll just say like under 18 and under players in general. We don't have club teams here, right? So those players are playing at their local high schools, or I guess what would be like their secondary schools in Europe and things. And so that kind of replaces that club element that you guys are used to there. Now there's a different aspect of, they do have summer teams and travel teams, and to be honest, that's where a lot of these guys are getting recruited from nowadays. So it's a little bit of a mix, but I wouldn't call their summer travel teams the same. It's not nearly the same as like a European club team, but yeah. So the big change is basically I'm coaching that club level pre-college group of people, usually from about 14 to 18.
Okay, that is really interesting. So I guess interesting to understand a little bit more. So obviously you coach at sort of that level. Obviously you have probably a really good understanding of the different types of game, different styles, and obviously different ways of playing the game. Just to understand, within high school, is that something you've adopted over to your sim league experience, or is it so completely different that you consider different things, or how do you feel the game kind of translate?
So I guess I'll answer in two things. Like first of all, I would say like my personal philosophy is totally not necessarily like what I teach my teams and my players, or like what I as a coach prefer and what I identify as here's how I would run a team. But they definitely influences like what I'm doing in the CBGM. Like Alabama is kind of my team where I'm running it how I would run a college team, and then Northwestern is running everything I do in the game, I base off of real life feelings and theories and stuff. Like UT Arlington, my long term vision there is inspired by some rival coaches here in like the region and area that I coach in. They coach completely differently than the way I do. And so it's kind of a fun way of saying, all right, well, let me see how that style might do in this sim league and stuff. So, what I feel in the real life has definitely influenced the way I play the game. Sometimes probably to a fault, because I think, because it's a game, I'm going to stubbornly do things the way I think they should be done, even if I kind of know that maybe it's not optimal or whatever, or I figure things out that maybe are more optimal than what I'm doing. But I think that makes it fun for me. So I would say definitely that like what I'm doing in the game is influenced by, my thoughts outside of it. And then
so what are your general thoughts on how the game should be played from your, if you're sitting there at the top of the pyramid and you are deciding how basketball should be played for the next 10, 15 years, what would you really love to see, like, teams playing and teams running and styles and things like that?
So I'll give you, it's going to be a little bit of a politician's answer. I would say the one thing I do love about sports and about coaching is that there are a lot of different ways to be successful, right? And what I've learned coaching, because I coached at a very high level of high school basketball and probably one of the most competitive regions in metro areas in the States. And so, I love that because people do things differently, and like teams are successful in a lot of different ways. But I do like the modern game. I think the modern game makes a lot of sense. Coaching young kids, none of the young kids today that I coach, when I say none, I mean literally, I haven't coached a kid in 5 years who wants to play back to the basketball, right? So nobody wants to be Akeem Olajuwon. They want to be Kevin Durant. Guys who can kind of face up and play it that way. And I think that's the biggest difference. Is everybody wants to be perimeter oriented, wants to be, positionless basketball is a concept that I tend to believe in to a degree. So, I do like the modern game. I think that's a trend that's not going to change anytime soon. I think it'll be a long time before you see anybody trying to force the ball into the post. And I think Gary or Wolverine Studios should probably, consult people on where the game's going a little bit more, because you don't see a ton of people really trying to pound the post as much, and it's actually not the most efficient shot type in the world, even though I've noticed in the game you got guys shooting like 70% from the field sometimes. But I digress. That's kind of my answer. So I do like the modern game. I do like 4 out, 5 out type of systems.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the way the game's going now is you don't necessarily have that type of back to basket player, but you tend to have, I would call it evolutions of that type of game, where it's more in terms of handoffs, more in terms of screen play, split play, off of that big man. You don't tend to just pass the ball into the big man, just everyone clear out and see what he can do essentially anymore.
And don't get me wrong, you still have some guys that do it. I'm not saying it's like nobody does it. I'm just saying like young kids don't want to do it.
No. And it'd be very interesting to see whether we get down the line and if there is a type of player or a unique type of player that maybe does develop that type of game, or a series of players who do, whether that then becomes a style of play that people necessarily want to go back to, because maybe people have forgotten how to defend that type of play, possibly.
I could see that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So should we dive in and talk a little bit about your teams? Because I feel that's going to hopefully talk a little bit more about the strengths that you're talking about and the style of play that you're trying to do. So let me quickly do one of these lovely screen shares and quickly flip us over to a different window, to the actual roster of Alabama. So I think it's probably best we start with Alabama, considering that is your primary team, really. It's fair to say, in the CBGM. Interested to get your thoughts, obviously, a little bit more on the philosophy and the style of play you're looking to do with Alabama. As you said, that's probably going to be your one where you're trying to think about how you would do it as if you actually were a college AD, college coach. And a little bit maybe on the roster construction and where you're going would be a fascinating insight for us.
Yeah, so and I'll try to keep it quick because I tend to ramble. Alabama's my sort of baby. I graduated from the University of Alabama and was born and raised in the state and stuff, and so this is kind of my baby.
Kev, can I just ask, what did you
Yeah.
play? Did you play at a decent level at all? Because obviously you talked about coaching. Did you play in college, or did you play in high school?
I definitely played in high school. Was typical high school. I mean, probably a little above average. Maybe could have gone JUCO or something, but no, I didn't. I wasn't blinded by D1. A former teammate of mine in high school is now in the NBA, and so I kind of saw what that level of talent looked like every day.
Yeah, yeah.
And I wasn't fooled to think that I was going to go any higher than that. But no, I mean, I played at that level, and that's about it.
So this is your alumni then of Alabama as well. So you have a strong connection to this team anyway.
Yep, exactly. But yeah, so like diving into the philosophy of what I'm trying to get to here. Obviously no control over the roster that exists. It definitely was not my ideal roster to start out with in terms of what I want to play. We kind of performed about what I expected. I think maybe we underperformed a little bit. I thought we'd be a little better. But we'll see. At the end of the day, for Alabama, my philosophy is really built kind of around my own philosophy. I consider myself. I am more naturally drawn to the offensive side of coaching. Doesn't mean that I don't coach defense or anything like that. But in terms of what we want to do with Alabama, and it may backfire for me because I don't think there's a clean way to do it in the game, but I'm going to try, is to kind of recreate a four, what's called like a 4-out, 1-in system on offense, like a 4-out motion, inspired by like what Jay Wright runs at Villanova a lot. So the shortest way to kind of define that is like having a 4-man that can kind of step out and shoot threes and who's a little more perimeter oriented. I think the game itself is a little limited because you have motion as an offensive type and you have 5-out as an offensive type. But I think there's really a 4-out type of motion offense that isn't in the game that should be. And that's what I'm trying to build towards. So we're going to look to kind of play some interchangeable wings. So basically, on top of that, my ideal starting 5 would basically be like 2 point guards or what I would call 2 ball handlers, and then 2 wings. So like my 4-man's probably just going to be a bigger small forward for most teams, 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" type of with some ball skills or some shooting ability. And then I'll have like a 5, which is a little more traditional of a center who defends, rebounds. Probably won't ever be a key cog offensively, but that's kind of the archetype, I guess, that I'm trying to go for in the future with Bama.
Yeah, and it certainly speaks to the rotation you've been running for this team, certainly. Because one of the things I did notice before we came on today, just looking at the teams to get a bit of an overview, was obviously you're running Kittles, who's primarily a power forward, sort of in a more of a small forward position. And I believe it is Bodica, who is running primarily at 4, mainly, I'm guessing, because of the outside shooting that he brings.
Yeah, and for this particular season, some of that is just trying to figure out how to get a semi-competitive team on the floor. But to your point, that is kind of what my teams would look like going forward, right? If I could get in the right type of players.
Yeah, and I guess the positive thing here with Alabama is that you are losing your sort of primary star, I'd guess, in Crowell, who is obviously the senior this year. But I mean, I'm just looking through in terms of your recruitment and who you've got left. So you've obviously got Tyler Smiley left, who looks like a pretty decent inside, not the best defender, but a decent inside-outside, front player if you're looking at positionless basketball. And in terms of your recruiting class, I mean, we could talk a little bit about this. Obviously, it's not going to be on screen, but I'm interested to understand. So obviously you brought in a guy called Alex Simmons, who is national ranked 72nd. Grant Brazel, who is a power forward ranked 256. So I'm guessing primarily because of their shooting ability. Both have outside shooting ability. But you also, interestingly, from my opinion, is you brought in an undersized point guard, a 5'11" point guard who's nationally ranked 35th in Terence Dearborn. But I think that gives a nice little flavour in terms of how you want to play going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of starting in reverse order, like I didn't necessarily like Dearborn's not my prototypical point guard, but just because like when I say like having two ball handlers on the court, right? Like part of the reason I like that is that they can be kind of interchangeable, right? And you're limited in how you can match up with teams in the game itself, right? So having two guys that can both kind of run point or be a shooting guard gives you matchup flexibility, which I like, and that sort of aligns with the having two wings or whatever as well, right? I can kind of a perfect world, I'd be able to kind of swap them around if one's a better defender or whatever. So Dearborn doesn't fit that exactly, but I just, man, my guards are so bad on this AI generated roster, and they're all young. So it kind of is a good thing, but I was going to go for a point guard this year regardless, and I lost out on I forget his name, South Carolina kid who's really good, but yeah, I think he'll be an all right player. And then you hit the other two. I won't go into too much detail, but Brazel was a home state kid. I think I started pretty high on him. He's probably not going to be a world beater, but I think he'll pair really well with like Smiley going forward and kind of be that. Give you a little bit of an outside touch, and he still can defend and rebound on the inside, hopefully. And then Simmons, I think is going to be a sleeper because like I don't remember exactly. I don't have the profile pulled up, but I think he was like top 25 at one of the regional camps. He's a hardworking kid. Now he had some indications that I think he may end up being a little better than 70th in the country. Mm-hmm. And I desperately needed a small forward in this class, so. I'm glad it worked out for him.
Yeah, no, interesting. Some I think I'd say some interesting and probably good recruits are going to come in, helpfully buff up this team for next season. Yeah. I guess looking forward for this Alabama roster, obviously this year, struggled a little bit in conference play. Ended up 7-11, 13-18 in terms of total record. And what's your sort of planned progression for this team? Obviously, as you start to get your types of players in that you want to build, as you said, your type of ideal sort of strategy and offense around. What would be your sort of benchmarks as you go through the next couple of years?
I think at a high level, like I kind of when I saw the roster, I was thinking, it's going to take 3 seasons, maybe by the 3rd season, I think, all right, maybe we're competitive in the SEC, meaning a top 5 finish, I guess, would be the easiest way to describe it. We could possibly be there next year if the freshmen are really impactful. But I think that, I think right now, like the next season, possibly the next 2 seasons, we're looking like a middle of the pack SEC team. We got to get some guards in. If I've got the roster up, I'm assuming that's what you're looking at, but like Sullivan and Tarkanian just aren't good enough to take us past where we kind of finished this year in the SEC. I'm hoping because they're sophomores and they've got some decent potential that they get better after this year because they both played a lot of minutes for us. But just all across the board, it's just a sort of poor backcourt right now. Yeah.
I mean that's. I mean, we talk a little bit about the guard play, but I mean that's one of the limitations I find with this draft day sports college basketball is that you can't alternate the ball handler as much. Yeah. I know that I think in the pro game that you can't specifically say I want this guy as the ball handler, but I know it does rotate based on who's got good handling abilities. So it's not always the case of the point guard bringing the ball up, and you can flip the depth chart around to kind of fit that as such as well. But in the pro game, it's good because you can actually set the matchup. So you can say, like, for example, if you want LeBron James bringing the ball up at point guard, you can play him at point guard. But then on the defensive side, you can say, actually, I just want you to defend the small forward and reassess the lineups. It's a little bit more tricky to do in this game because you can't do that defensive back end tweaking that you would want to necessarily do if you've got some poor guard play, as you said at Alabama. So should we move on and talk a little bit about your second team, which was the Big Ten Northwestern Wildcats? I'm sure you probably haven't seen the preview that's gone out. Is going out today in terms of the second round. I don't know if you've seen the scores for that at all yet.
Yeah, I saw the results against Maryland.
So, this team actually really surprised me this year. I don't know what your views were in terms of the Big Ten, but definitely surprised me. I guess in terms of the roster, slightly different to Alabama. I guess the projections are slightly different as well. Where you want to take this team?
Yeah, for sure. Team definitely surprised me this year. I was pretty much in agreement with you that I expected us to finish sort of towards the bottom. I mean, even if you look at the roster here, we just there's just not a lot of quality on the team, but somehow we clicked because at one point this team was 13-3, net 12 rating or something, and we had knocked off 3 top 25 teams. We had lost a couple of bad ones too, but and then we hit just a streak where I think I made a post and kind of knew I was going to be probably I don't know, jinxing myself, I guess, but where it didn't make sense that we weren't ranked in the top 25 at that point, and then all of a sudden we lose 7 games in a row, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is what I kind of expected us to be, but yeah, this team has exceeded expectations. It's going to be an incredibly challenging road ahead for Northwestern, and I kind of like it, but it kind of frustrates me too, because I didn't realize how hard it would be to recruit at a school with 1,100 SAT requirement. You are so limited on your options for players. I think it might even be to the point of Gary needs to revisit how many people qualify, because if I think about the average SAT score at the area where I live and coach in, there are more kids scoring 1,000, 1,100 than I think kind of show up in the numbers maybe. And I also don't think that you necessarily have to score that high to get in as a basketball player in these places, but anyways, sorry. So yeah, so that's kind of so Northwestern's going to be a challenge. So I've got pretty realistic expectations. I kind of want to play the role of spoiler throughout CBGM with Northwestern. I don't know if we'll ever truly compete to win a Big Ten title. I would certainly like to be a team that you don't want to see come tournament time. My ultimate vision for this team is to build it full of shooters. We're going to run a 5-out offense similar to Illinois. I like the way that Jed's approaching his team. We're not there yet, so I didn't run that this year, but that's where we're going with this squad. I just want to fill it up with shooters, man. High academic shooters. I think the differentiation for this team will be how I approach defense. I am basically going to run one offensive set with them and mix in quite a lot of offensive freedom baskets. And the reason is so that I can free up practice time for defense, where I'm going to try to master 3 different zone defenses. And so that I can kind of tweak, how I'm playing each different team in the Big Ten, or, every sim in the Big Ten. Unfortunately we can't tailor our game plan for every single game, but yeah, so that's the plan with Northwestern, trying to take advantage of knowing that we're going to be limited talent wise. So we're going to try to be a little more creative on the defensive end, and then kind of hope that we can get to the point where we're, putting up 33s a game and hitting 14 of them or something, so.
Yeah, I mean, look, you commented quite a lot of things there in terms of where you think the team's going, in terms of recruitment, in terms of surprising. I mean, the guy that surprised me the most, mainly in the tournament action, has been Orion Mitchell. He looks like an absolute star in terms of shooting performance and offense he could bring to this team. I guess the positive thing that he is still a junior, so you can kind of start to build a bit of a deeper roster around him and maybe make a shout in a year or two's time.
Yeah, He's been incredible. I think he's averaging like 18 points a game, which I mean, I knew he would lead the team in scoring, but like he's played really well and shot the ball really well, which has really helped our team. Because and I'm really excited to have him next year because I totally blew it in recruiting, man. I did not manage my budget well, or just again, like I just didn't know what to expect because I had never played a high academic team in the single player. And
Yeah, so talk to us about that, because I mean that's
yeah,
one of the things I noticed about this team is obviously just no one is actually committed to the Northwestern for next year at this moment in time. I know you've got 3 outstanding offers, but I mean, talk to us a little bit. As you said, academics is a challenge. Was budget also a challenge for Northwestern?
budget was a challenge because I didn't manage it well. So I was hot on an international recruit, and I'd spent a decent amount of change. I felt like I was in a good place because I think you stole a guy from me with Michigan, actually, which was a killer, which I kind of knew was going to happen, but I was so committed at the time and that I didn't let him go. But I had like 3 people, including that guy, where I was like, okay, I'm going to get 2 out of this 3. And I felt pretty confident in it. And one of them was an international player who I kind of was like, all right, I felt good about it. Let's go. And he ended up signing elsewhere, or he didn't qualify. I think he signed somewhere else and then ended up, he wouldn't have qualified anyway. So I was screwed. But that was just a mistake on my end. I shouldn't have gone after him. I had seen I thought that somebody said something about like GPAs and international recruits tend to like be a lot lower than their SAT scores would end up being. And so I got burned with him. Had another guy committed, a 4-star, who I was really excited about, who missed the SAT by 50 points, I think. So that killed me. And so now I'm sitting there with, I've got I think like $500 left in my budget. I've got 2 offers out to people who I don't even think I can afford to visit. And it's looking very likely that I'm going to end up going into the transfer session with 3 open scholarships. So.
Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, if you fall in love with a couple of guys and they just turn around and say, no, we don't want to go to you. If you spent the budget as well, you're kind of in a tough place. I guess transfers might be a bit of a godsend to Northwestern if there's a couple of decent guys there with good GPA averages. You never know. But yeah, should we move on to your final team? I mean, Northwestern's a really interesting one. I mean, I talked a little bit about it in the preview that's going up today, but they really surprised me. I thought they played some really good basketball, and I thought I honestly think Mitchell looks like he's going to probably be a star in the Big Ten going forward. He just looked phenomenal. I don't know whether that's down to strategy or whether just his actual shooting ability, but he certainly did surprise me a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely not strategy with those guys. I think if we hadn't hit that 7-game stretch where we dropped 7 in a row, we might have had a shot to get a bubble bid. But oh well, we did. So
yeah,
it is what it is.
So we move on to the what we call the CBGM sub league of the Sun Belt, where everyone seems to have a team. Everyone seems to want to win this league more than anywhere else. You've obviously got the Texas Arlington Mavericks, I believe.
Yep.
Not a bad season, is it, really, for Texas so far? What's your take on it?
Again, totally exceeded my expectations. I did a Sunbelt preview, and I'll try to keep this brief, but I had my own team ranked 11 out of 12. Now part of that was because I didn't understand that I thought athleticism was a really heavy influencer on your stamina ratings and stuff, and then that has since been clarified. So if I could do it again, I would have had us rated somewhere between 6 and 8. But we were ranked 12 out of 12 when I did team averages for the Sun Belt in terms of athleticism and rebounding, and we were a bad defensive team on paper. And so I was just man, how are we going to win? My top 5 is really solid for the Sun Belt, but I just thought we're not going to be able to play them 40 minutes a game, so we're going to get drilled in when it comes to backups and stuff. But that apparently wasn't the case, and I totally slept on these guys. So I'm really happy with how the season's gone for them. And it's actually, I think, one of my of the 3 teams, this is the style of play that I'm kind of most excited about in terms of seeing it, because I think
so tell us a little bit about the style of play, because you said at the beginning of the show that Texas was going to be a bit of an interesting experiment. What's the plan with this team?
So, like I said, there are two coaches in the area, two high school coaches, and they run very aggressive defensive styles of play. And so what I've kind of done is try to blend like inspiration from both of them into what I want to do with the Texas Maverick or UT Arlington. And it's all built around like tempo. Like I even named the coach for this team Pacey McTempo, because I want to play. I'll have some tagline for it at some point, but like the fastest 40 in basketball. I want to play. At some point, they're going to be a max tempo, full court pressure. Let's try to go out and create chaos and put up as many shots as we possibly can every game. And I'm going to do that by by mixing a couple of different full court presses in and trying to bring in a group of guys that are really high athleticism, high defenders. It's interesting because I'm when I'm recruiting players for this in the future and now, like I'm really ignoring offensive. Like I don't care if they can't score the ball at all. And the hope is that by being really, really good athletes and really good defenders, we can just kind of create easy offense. Now, I did not run this team this year that way because they just weren't built for that. But that's where we're going long term. So,
yeah, and it's really interesting because one of the stats about this team that I noted, obviously didn't know what style of play you're looking to play going forward, but they are actually one of the top 30 teams on offense in terms of points per game. Maybe due to a little bit of pace. I don't know whether that's factored in because I haven't looked at the offensive efficiency stats of this team, but that was the thing that stood out to me. I was like, oh, a Sunbelt team in the top 30 in terms of points per game is interesting in itself. So it's almost like you're going to flick a switch and sort of transition this team around to a completely different way that the AI had set them up as.
Well, to a degree, like I would expect them to be a high scoring team in the future just because of the pace of play. Now that that could end up being, I mean, it's going to be an interesting team because I do think like 80 points per game is kind of what I would expect going forward too. We'll do it a little differently, I guess, but offensively, this team played somewhat similar to how they'll play in the future. Like I think I'm running flex with them, and I'll have one, again, kind of like Northwestern, one offensive set. But the difference is this team will be almost like a really, really low in terms of running sets team. So like 30% and lower. And again, this is inspired by how a couple coaches around here do it. But it's essentially the real life theory behind it is, if you don't play really, really hard and aggressively on defense, you won't play. And I don't really care how you score the ball. Play really, really hard on defense, and then I'm going to give you freedom to go play offense kind of how you want to, right?
Yeah.
And that's
kind of like a reward kind of thing where it's almost like if you play tough defense, I kind of let you play your own little style of almost like rec ball on offense, really.
Yep, exactly. And then we'll do hockey subs with this team when I can get to 10 bodies that I feel comfortable running that kind of system. Running guys for 4 to 6 minutes and then bringing in a whole new 5, and then running them for 4 to 6 minutes and bringing a whole new 5. And again, I have no idea if that's going to work. I have not tested any of this stuff in like single player, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun to try, and so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm actually probably keeping an eye on this team now. You said that. It's just I've never seen that style of play used in the college game at all. So that's going to be a fascinating watch actually to keep an eye on Texas over the next couple of years as you start to bring in the recruits going forward. So that kind of covers all of the teams that you're looking after in the CBGM. I guess what would be interesting just to finish off with really, Coach Kev, is obviously, you've got some fantastic actual real life basketball experience. You've obviously playing the games for a little while. Have you got any sort of top tips or advice to coaches in the CBGM or anyone who wants to maybe join the CBGM?
Man, I'm probably not that. There are some really good guys in the CBGM that really know the game very well. So, and I think I know like Card just put out a video, and some other guys offer really good advice in the help tips area. So I don't know that I have any useful tips to the game. I barely knew what athleticism did coming into the season, so so I'm probably not the best source there. What I would say is that I would embrace everybody in the CBGM to have fun with it, and like everybody's different, and I think everybody should be allowed to play the game the way they want to play. I love the coaching aspect and the team building. As you can see, like every team's kind of different. But I think, don't get so caught up on trying to win every game and getting frustrated when your team doesn't win every game. Have a vision for your team, play to that vision. And if you don't make the tournament, like, it's okay. It's just the game, dude. You know what I mean? Like just don't get so upset if the results don't work. I feel like I made a couple of really good strategic decisions this year and got complete results that were completely opposite of what I expected. And but that's just me. Like have fun with it. Like I said, have a vision for your team. Don't be afraid to build to that, and don't get so caught up in feeling like you have to do a certain thing because maybe that's quote unquote optimal, or because somebody else is having a lot of success with it. Be confident in doing things your own way. And in terms of anybody that's on the fence, man, join up, have fun. Don't be intimidated by it. Like I promise you, the fact that I know a lot about basketball in real life has absolutely no correlation to my abilities in this game, and probably is a hindrance more than anything else because, like I said, I will stubbornly get stuck on things that I think should work a certain way. And in the game, other people may see it for what it is, and I think that could be an advantage for them.
Yeah, I think you've got some sound advice there. Just enjoy the narrative, enjoy the ride. If you do well, it's great. If you don't necessarily do well, just have a plan and just enjoy and see how that plan comes to fruition. If it doesn't, then maybe try something else and see what happens. But there's plenty of media coverage, there's plenty of coaches to chat about different things, and certainly some great advice to anyone in the league or anyone looking to join the league. Coach Kev, it's been great to have you on. Best of luck with the conference tournaments and the national tournaments, which I'm sure some of your teams will probably be involved in. And good luck with the continuing recruiting in Northwestern. Hopefully you'll get a couple of transfers there as well.
Yeah, hopefully, man. Hopefully. But again, appreciate you having me on, man. I love that you do this. I think it's pretty awesome, and I think it really adds a lot to the league. So, again, I'd encourage any other coaches to get on and just have fun with it, even if you maybe don't have a plan yet. Just that's okay too. Talk through it and get on here and support this series.
Absolutely, we're always looking for new coaches to join the episodes, and who knows, we'll have maybe another one coming out in a little while's time. And if you're interested, drop us a line and get involved.